The chandeliers hanging from the vaulted ceiling of the Black Monarch Palace scattered fractured diamonds of light across the grand ballroom, painting the gathering in a glow so luxurious it almost disguised the cruelty festering beneath it. Hidden deep beneath London's financial district, 50 floors underground behind biometric steel vaults and military-grade surveillance systems, this was the beating heart of Europe's criminal empire. Tonight, the most feared men in the underworld had gathered beneath its gilded ceilings. Russian arms traffickers stood beside Colombian cartel lords. Italian syndicate bosses exchanged quiet words with senators whose public smiles hid bloodstained hands. Billionaire smugglers sipped hundred-year-old whiskey, while hired assassins in tailored black suits lined the marble walls like obedient shadows. This was not simply a party. It was the annual Castellano Summit, where governments were bought, nations quietly manipulated, and empires strengthened over glasses filled with stolen fortunes. And at the very center of it all sat Bianca Castellano, completely alone. Her elevated platform overlooked the entire ballroom like a throne meant for royalty, yet tonight it felt less like a seat of power and more like a public execution stage. Her breathing remained painfully shallow, as the emerald silk gown wrapped tightly around her body dug mercilessly into the softness of her waist and stomach. The custom-made dress had been designed by Paris's most expensive underground designer, specifically ordered by Dante himself. He had insisted the gown be tighter, slimmer, more fitted, as though forcing layers of silk against her full body could somehow sculpt her into the kind of woman he wished she had been. The sharp boning pressed against her ribs so tightly she could feel sweat collecting beneath her chest, despite the freezing temperature inside the ballroom. Her heavy thighs pressed uncomfortably against the velvet chair beneath her. Every slight movement reminded her that hundreds of eyes were quietly measuring every inch of her body. Judging, comparing, mocking. Across the ballroom, the source of her humiliation stood laughing. Dante Castellano looked exactly like the kind of man history feared remembering. Over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders sculpted beneath a custom black Italian suit, dark hair slicked neatly backward, jaw sharp enough to look carved from stone, and cold predator eyes that had ordered the deaths of governments and rival families without the slightest flicker of emotion. He was Europe's undisputed Mafia emperor. Entire countries adjusted policy based on whether Dante Castellano woke up pleased or angry. Tonight, however, his attention was nowhere near his wife. His hands rested possessively around Sofia Marino's waist. Bianca's stomach twisted painfully as she watched her husband guide Sofia effortlessly across the ballroom floor beneath the soft melody of the orchestra. Sofia looked exactly like everything the criminal world worshipped. Tall, razor-thin, long legs disappearing beneath a crimson silk dress that hugged every dangerous curve with predatory perfection. Her dark lipstick framed a smile filled with quiet arrogance as she leaned closer against Dante's chest. Bianca noticed the way his fingers tightened against Sofia's lower back. The same hands that had not touched Bianca in over 2 years. Nearby, whispers floated through the room like sharpened blades. They were not quiet enough. They don't even look married anymore. That woman should never have become queen of this empire. I still do not understand how Dante tolerates her appearance. She looks ridiculous beside him. Honestly, Sofia should already replace her. Bianca lowered her gaze slowly toward the crystal glass trembling slightly between her fingers. The dark wine inside reflected distorted fragments of the ballroom lights. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself not to react. Not here. Never here. 3 years ago, their words would have shattered her. Now she had simply learned how to survive them. A burst of cruel laughter snapped her attention sideways. Lord Vittorio Russo stood nearby speaking with 2 Balkan cartel financiers, his expensive cigar dangling lazily between perfectly manicured fingers. He stared directly toward Bianca and smirked. I have seen armored trucks carrying less weight than the Queen's chair tonight. The men beside him erupted into laughter. Across from them, a female broker wearing diamonds worth millions leaned closer. I almost pity Dante. The empire has the most feared king in Europe, yet he must return home every night to that. Another wave of laughter. Bianca's chest rose slowly, then fell. No tears, no reaction, only silence. Years of humiliation had taught her one valuable lesson. Predators loved weakness. She would not give them that satisfaction. Across the room, Dante suddenly leaned downward, whispering something into Sophia's ear. Sophia threw her head back, laughing beautifully before pressing a slow kiss against his cheek. The ballroom erupted in approving applause. Bianca stared at the sight while something dark and ancient seemed to pulse quietly beneath her skin. No one noticed. No one ever noticed. Not the senators secretly protected by shell companies, registered under her family's hidden offshore network. Not the billionaires laundering stolen military contracts through invisible banking systems, connected directly to private encrypted servers she alone controlled. Not the cartel leaders moving billions through routes designed generations ago by her bloodline. Not even Dante understood. They all believed this empire belonged to him. They believed his violence built it. His ruthlessness controlled it. His intelligence sustained it. They were all catastrophically wrong. Deep beneath the Black Monarch Palace, hidden below 20 reinforced concrete levels inaccessible to anyone but a single living biometric signature, thousands of encrypted systems hummed quietly in darkness. Private satellite channels, weapons routes, black market banking grids, government bribery archives, dead man kill switches attached to dozens of world leaders. Every artery pumping blood through the criminal empire. Every single system connected to one biological source. Sorry. Bianca slowly reached upward and let trembling fingers brush through the impossibly long silver-black hair, falling heavily over her shoulders and down past her waist. For a brief second, a strange electrical pulse moved through the strands. Small, invisible, almost alive. Far across the ballroom, the mansion security monitors flickered once, then stabilized. Bianca noticed. No one else did. Another burst of cruel laughter echoed through the hall as Sophia wrapped both arms around Dante's neck possessively, deliberately pressing herself closer while staring directly toward Bianca with quiet triumph burning in her eyes. Bianca simply sat there, silent, still. Humiliated before an empire, she secretly kept breathing. And somewhere deep inside her chest, beneath years of heartbreak, obedience, and carefully buried pain, something was beginning to wake. Tonight, every person in this room believed Bianca Castellano was the weakest woman standing beneath these chandeliers. By midnight, they would understand they had spent years mocking the one woman holding their entire world together. 3 years earlier, long before the whispers, before the humiliation became routine, Bianca Morti stood inside the ancient cathedral of Palermo wearing a diamond-white wedding gown worth more than most governments secretly moved in a year. The world believed she was marrying Dante Castellano because 2 powerful mafia dynasties had agreed to unite through love and ambition. Cameras captured the feared young emperor sliding a ring onto her trembling finger, while politicians, cartel financiers, and European syndicate leaders applauded the birth of what newspapers later called the most powerful criminal marriage in modern history. But hidden beneath the cathedral, 20 floors underground inside a vault known only to the oldest blood families, another ceremony had taken place far away from cameras. Bianca had placed her palm against a biometric obsidian terminal connected to something the outside world had never seen, the Morty Grid, a shadow infrastructure built by her ancestors over 2 centuries that secretly controlled offshore laundering systems, encrypted weapons channels, hidden government blackmail archives, and private banking routes moving nearly 60% of Europe's illegal wealth. The moment she married Dante, the grid temporarily authorized him access, making him believe the empire now belonged to him. Only Bianca knew the truth. She had not married into his kingdom. He had been quietly allowed into hers. At first, she believed love might eventually grow between them. Dante was magnetic, terrifying, and impossibly powerful, the kind of man entire cities feared breathing against. In the first year, he treated her carefully, introducing her to underworld royalty across Monaco, Dubai, and Milan while teaching her how his empire functioned. Bianca had fallen deeply for the dangerous softness he revealed only in private, convincing herself their arranged marriage might become real. But power corrupts men faster than blood poisons enemies. As Dante's influence expanded, he began believing his success came entirely from his own brutality. New territories surrendered too easily. Rival families mysteriously lost funding before wars even began. Governments quietly erased investigations before his lawyers intervened. He called it strategic genius. Bianca stayed silent every time she watched the invisible Morty systems quietly removing every obstacle in his path. Then Sophia Marino arrived. Former luxury model, beautiful enough to make rooms pause when she entered, sharp enough to understand men with power were easiest to manipulate through ego. Slowly Dante stopped inviting Bianca beside him during meetings. Family portraits disappeared from office walls. Fashion consultants were ordered to redesign Bianca's wardrobe, always tighter, always slimmer, always forcing her body into impossible expectations she could never meet. One night Bianca overheard Dante laughing with Sophia inside his penthouse office, his cold voice slicing through the half-open door. "The marriage gave me everything I needed. The empire is mine now. I owe Bianca nothing except tolerance." Bianca stood frozen outside listening as her entire world quietly collapsed. But what Dante never understood was terrifyingly simple. The empire was never his. Every account, every shipment, every private army, every hidden vault still answered only to one living signature. And the day he forgot that truth, everything he built would disappear like smoke. For nearly 15 years inside the Castellano Empire, one rule existed that no servant, stylist, bodyguard, or tailor ever dared question. No one touched Bianca Castellano's hair. It had become such an unquestioned law inside the mansion that even new employees were warned during private orientation sessions that under absolutely no circumstances were scissors, heated irons, chemical treatments, or unauthorized hands ever allowed near the long silver-black waves falling endlessly down the Mafia queen's back. The empire assumed it was vanity. The tabloids secretly covering Europe's criminal elite often mocked her obsession, publishing anonymous whispers claiming Bianca hid behind her hair because she hated the softness of her own reflection. Dante himself often sneered whenever he saw her carefully brushing it before bed, once coldly remarking that she cared more about preserving dead strands than becoming a woman worthy of standing beside a king. Bianca never defended herself. She simply lowered her eyes and remained silent, allowing everyone to believe the lie because the truth hidden beneath those strands was far too dangerous for anyone to know. Deep beneath the Black Monarch Palace, 27 floors underground behind military-grade titanium vaults protected by retinal scanners, thermal recognition systems, and rotating armed security teams, sat the invisible machine controlling the entire global underworld economy. It was called the Veil Network, an encrypted criminal infrastructure designed nearly 200 years earlier by Bianca's ancestors, when the Morty bloodline realized governments were becoming too technologically advanced for traditional mafia operations. The system was unlike anything intelligence agencies had ever discovered. It controlled offshore banking routes in Switzerland, manipulated shell corporations across Singapore, redirected private weapons shipments through disguised military contracts, managed hidden assassination ledgers, and stored blackmail archives capable of collapsing entire governments overnight. But unlike ordinary digital systems, the Veil network was biologically coded. No passwords existed. No software engineers could access it. It functioned through microscopic quantum fiber woven directly inside Bianca's hair at birth, each strand acting like a living neurological transmitter, connected permanently to her rare inherited genetic frequency. Her body produced an impossible neural signature unique only to women born from the Morty bloodline. The hair stabilized signal transmission and allowed temporary empire access to authorized partners through marriage contracts. Without it, the network would immediately recognize catastrophic breach and begin irreversible shutdown protocols worldwide. Bianca had known this responsibility since childhood. At 11 years old, she had watched her grandmother place trembling hands on her shoulders inside the hidden family vault and whisper words she never forgot. Our bodies were engineered to carry what ordinary humans cannot survive. We are not women protecting the empire, Bianca. We are the empire itself. Since then, she had guarded every strand like a living weapon. Tonight, seated alone inside the underground gala while cruel laughter echoed around her, Bianca instinctively reached upward and slowly ran trembling fingers through the heavy silver-black waves falling over her emerald dress. A strange pulse quietly flickered beneath her scalp. Somewhere far below the ballroom, hidden servers suddenly flashed red for exactly 1 second before stabilizing. Bianca froze. Her heartbeat quickened. Across the dance floor, she noticed Sophia Marino staring directly at her hair, eyes narrowing with dangerous fascination. Then Sophia slowly smiled. In that single chilling moment, Bianca felt something deep inside her chest tighten with instinctive terror. For the very first time in years, she understood that tonight was not ordinary humiliation. Something catastrophic had just begun moving toward her, and she suddenly feared Dante was about to make the worst mistake of his entire life. The private celebration began an hour after the grand ballroom emptied, but unlike the public gala downstairs, this gathering was reserved only for the monsters who truly controlled the empire. Hidden behind fingerprint-locked titanium doors on the highest floor of Black Monarch Palace, the Crimson Lounge radiated obscene wealth and quiet danger. Velvet walls imported from Milan reflected the dim golden glow of antique chandeliers, while billion-dollar smugglers, Balkan traffickers, assassins, and corrupt ministers lounged across leather sofas discussing wars disguised as business opportunities. A live jazz quartet played softly in the corner, barely masking the low hum of private conversations capable of collapsing nations by sunrise. Bianca sat alone near the panoramic glass overlooking underground city tunnels carved beneath London decades earlier by the Castellano Syndicate. She wanted desperately to leave, but tradition demanded the Mafia queen remain until Dante dismissed the gathering himself. Her emerald gown felt tighter now, pressing cruelly against her stomach every time she breathed, but physical discomfort had long become familiar compared to the emotional suffocation tightening around her chest whenever she watched Dante and Sophia together. Across the room, Dante leaned casually against the private bar while Sophia stood between his legs, feeding him expensive whiskey directly from her own lips as laughter erupted around them. Nobody bothered hiding their amusement anymore. Tonight, the disrespect toward Bianca had become entertainment. Sophia knew exactly how to command attention. Every movement she made was carefully calculated, every smile sharpened like a blade. She thrived on being watched, on knowing powerful men adjusted their breathing when she entered a room. Yet despite possessing everything the criminal empire admired, impossible beauty, lethal confidence, predatory elegance, there remained one thing she could not stop obsessing over: Bianca's hair. 2 months earlier, during a cartel bombing in Madrid, Sophia had narrowly escaped death after an explosive device hidden inside a luxury convoy detonated beside her armored vehicle. Though she survived, part of the blast had severely burned sections of her scalp. The damage remained hidden beneath expensive imported extensions, but Sophia privately hated what she saw every morning in the mirror. Since arriving tonight, her dark eyes had repeatedly drifted toward the endless silver-black waves falling heavily around Bianca's body like liquid silk. The contrast infuriated her. How could a woman she considered physically beneath her possess something so naturally breathtaking? Jealousy slowly twisted inside her chest until finally she decided she wanted it. Not admired from distance, owned, claimed, taken. The moment arrived suddenly. Sophia stepped away from Dante's embrace and casually approached the center of the lounge, lifting her champagne glass high enough to silence nearby conversations. Every head slowly turned toward her. Even Bianca instinctively looked up. Sophia smiled sweetly before circling Dante like a predator wrapping invisible chains around its prey. "Darling," she purred softly, trailing crimson-painted fingers across Dante's chest. You promised my Vogue Noir campaign next week would become unforgettable. Dante smirked confidently and kissed her temple. Anything you want is already yours. Sophia's smile widened, but then her gaze slowly shifted across the room and landed directly on Bianca. The temperature inside Bianca's chest instantly dropped. Sophia extended one delicate finger toward the silver-black waves draped over Bianca's shoulders. Actually, she whispered with dangerous softness, there is something I want more than diamonds. Silence spread instantly through the lounge. The cartel leaders stopped drinking. The musicians quietly lowered their instruments. Bianca felt her pulse beginning to hammer violently as Sophia's lips curved with cruel amusement. I want her hair. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Dante's expression froze. Bianca's fingers instinctively gripped the velvet chair beneath her so tightly her knuckles turned white. Somewhere deep below the palace, hidden security servers suddenly flashed blood red. And for the first time all night, fear entered Bianca Castellano's eyes. The silence that followed Sophia's request spread through the crimson lounge like invisible poison, thick and suffocating, forcing every powerful criminal in the room into breathless anticipation. Bianca remained frozen in her chair, her pulse hammering violently against her ribs as though some ancient survival instinct deep within her body had awakened without warning. Across the room, Sophia stood smiling with quiet cruelty burning in her eyes, fully aware that what she had just asked for was no simple act of vanity. This was domination, a final humiliation carefully designed to erase Bianca publicly and permanently. Dante leaned against the private bar for several seconds, swirling the whiskey in his crystal glass while amusement slowly stretched across his face. To everyone watching, his silence meant only one thing. He was considering how far he wanted to go tonight. Bianca immediately understood the danger. Her fingers tightened around the velvet armrest so hard the diamonds on her wedding ring pressed painfully into her skin. For years she had endured whispers, insults, public humiliation, and watching another woman occupy the space where she once believed love lived. But this was something far worse. This crossed into territory Dante could not afford to touch. Slowly Bianca pushed herself to her feet. The emerald silk wrapped around her heavy body strained tightly as she stood, and immediately she caught several nearby cartel leaders exchanging mocking glances at the visible softness pressing against the expensive fabric. Normally she would lower her eyes and pretend not to notice, but tonight fear had burned away embarrassment. She stared directly at Dante for the first time in months. No. Her voice came out quieter than intended, but the words sliced cleanly through the room. Sophia raised one eyebrow, clearly entertained. Dante's expression darkened instantly. Bianca stepped forward, her breathing becoming shallow as the endless silver-black hair slid heavily across her shoulders like liquid shadow. Dante, she said again, stronger this time. You cannot do this. A wave of cruel laughter broke somewhere near the back of the lounge. One Balkan trafficker whispered something under his breath that made two senators smirk openly. Dante set his whiskey glass down with deliberate calm and slowly began walking toward her. The expensive leather soles of his shoes echoed sharply against the marble floor. His face had changed completely now. The warmth he showed Sophia moments earlier had vanished, replaced by the familiar coldness Bianca had come to fear over the years. Since when, he asked quietly, stopping inches from her trembling body, do you think you have the authority to deny me anything in my own empire? Bianca's throat tightened painfully. She could feel dozens of eyes drilling into her. Still, she forced herself to speak. You do not understand what my hair is connected to. Dante narrowed his eyes. Connected to? Bianca's voice shook now. Please, I am warning you, if you remove it. She hesitated, realizing she could not reveal everything. There will be consequences. That single sentence shattered whatever patience remained inside Dante. His expression twisted with fury, not because he believed her warning, but because she had dared challenge him publicly. In one violent motion, he grabbed the back of her neck and shoved her downward so hard her knees slammed against the marble floor. Gasps mixed with cruel laughter exploded around the room as pain shot through Bianca's body. Tears instantly blurred her vision. Sophia stepped closer, watching with open satisfaction while crossing her arms elegantly. Dante reached toward the antique display case mounted beside the fireplace and pulled free a pair of ceremonial gold shears reserved for blood contract signings. Their polished blades reflected the chandelier light like sharpened sunlight. Bianca began shaking uncontrollably. "Dante, stop," she whispered, desperation cracking through every word. "You have no idea what you are about to destroy." Dante leaned down beside her ear, his breath cold and merciless. "The only thing I'm destroying tonight," he whispered back, tightening his fist deep inside the thick silver-black strands pooled around her body, "is the last piece of vanity you hide behind." Then, before the entire criminal empire watching in silence, he yanked her head backward and drove the golden blades into the living strands of hair that had quietly held his entire world together. Somewhere far beneath Black Monarch Palace, every hidden server on the Morty network instantly turned blood red. The countdown had begun. The final metallic snap of the golden shears echoed through the Crimson Lounge, with a violence far greater than anyone in the room understood. Thick silver-black strands slid from Bianca's trembling shoulders and collapsed onto the polished marble floor like the severed nerve endings of something alive. For 3 endless seconds, absolute silence swallowed the penthouse. Bianca remained frozen on her knees, both hands pressed against the cold floor beneath her, while tears streamed silently down her face, her breathing fractured into uneven gasps. Jagged remnants of butchered hair now hung unevenly around her flushed cheeks, exposing a vulnerability she had spent years hiding behind those sacred strands. Behind her, Dante slowly straightened himself, gripping the severed bundle in one hand like a hunter admiring a trophy after slaughter. Then Sophia stepped forward smiling with predatory satisfaction, extending both hands eagerly. Dante placed the heavy silver-black locks into her arms while low applause immediately erupted around the room. Syndicate leaders laughed softly. Politicians raised their glasses. Somewhere near the back, one cartel financier muttered that Dante had finally rid himself of the Empire's most embarrassing decoration. Bianca heard every word. Yet strangely, beneath the humiliation crushing her chest, another sensation had begun spreading quietly through her body. Something cold, something ancient, something waking up. Without looking at anyone, Bianca slowly forced herself upward. Her knees burned violently from where they had struck marble seconds earlier. The emerald gown had torn along one side near her thigh, exposing bruised skin already darkening beneath the expensive fabric. Dante did not look at her. Sophia had already moved toward the vanity mirror, while private stylists rushed forward, carefully preparing to weave Bianca's stolen hair into a luxury extension piece exactly as requested. The room returned to celebration almost instantly, as though nothing meaningful had happened, as though years of emotional abuse had simply reached its natural conclusion tonight. Bianca turned silently and began walking toward the private elevator leading upstairs. Her footsteps felt strangely heavier with each movement. Halfway across the room, she noticed something impossible. The overhead security camera near the north entrance suddenly flickered once, then twice. Across the lounge, the antique chandelier lights dimmed for exactly 1 second before returning. A nearby bodyguard instinctively touched the earpiece connected to mansion security but frowned in confusion. Bianca stopped breathing. Deep inside her spine, a violent pulse of heat began spreading outward through every nerve. She understood immediately. The system had recognized catastrophic biological breach. The Veil network was shutting down. Behind her, the grandfather clock mounted beside Dante's private office began striking midnight. The first chime vibrated unnaturally loud against the marble walls. Sophia sat smiling while stylists carefully attached the severed silver-black strands against hidden clips woven into her scalp. Then the second chime struck. Instantly, every light inside Black Monarch Palace exploded into darkness. The music stopped. Glasses shattered. Panic erupted somewhere below as backup generators attempted emergency activation but failed immediately. Red security lights flashed violently across the penthouse walls. Dozens of encrypted phones inside cartel leaders' pockets began vibrating all at once. One Russian arms dealer stared at his screen before his face drained completely pale. "Impossible," he whispered. Nearby, a senator fumbled for his second phone only to discover every protected government line had disconnected. Another syndicate leader shouted that offshore Cayman accounts had been frozen permanently. Somewhere downstairs, the armored vault controlling weapons logistics had entered emergency lockdown. Across 5 continents, private bank servers began wiping billions in hidden criminal transactions from existence. Then suddenly Sophia screamed. The silver-black hair woven onto her scalp began glowing violently beneath the flashing red lights. She clawed at her head in pure terror as smoke rose from the roots. Her skin blistered instantly. The room exploded into chaos. Dante spun around in disbelief just as Bianca slowly turned back toward him. For the first time in years, she was no longer crying. Her eyes had become terrifyingly calm, and beneath Black Monarch Palace, the empire Dante believed he owned had officially begun collapsing in real time. Chaos spread through Black Monarch Palace faster than gunfire in a closed room. The elegant composure that had defined Europe's deadliest underworld leaders only minutes earlier completely vanished as every protected communication device inside the Crimson Lounge erupted with simultaneous emergency alerts. Russian syndicate commanders shouted into dead satellite phones, while senators frantically attempted reconnecting encrypted government lines that had suddenly disappeared from every secure network. Billionaire smugglers stared in disbelief as private banking applications flashed permanent account suspension warnings across screens previously considered untouchable by law enforcement on every continent. Armed bodyguards rushed through the corridors outside shouting conflicting orders, while emergency sirens began pulsing violently through the underground fortress. Yet standing quietly in the center of the madness, Bianca Castellano felt something inside her body changing with terrifying speed. The humiliation, the pain, the years of silent obedience had all been violently replaced by an unfamiliar sensation flooding through her bloodstream. Power. Raw, awakening power she had spent decades suppressing for the sake of preserving balance. Her fingers trembled slightly as electric heat began crawling upward through her spine, sending pulses of invisible force through the surrounding air. She no longer heard Sophia screaming behind her. She no longer heard Dante barking furious orders into disconnected phones. Her body had begun responding to a protocol older than the empire itself. Without saying a single word, Bianca turned and stepped into the private elevator, ascending toward the upper restricted residential floor while the criminal world below collapsed into panic. The moment the penthouse doors opened onto her private corridor, hidden sensors embedded behind the walls instantly recognized her biological signature. One by one, sections of polished marble began sliding sideways with mechanical precision, revealing a chamber Dante had never known existed despite living in this palace for years. Bianca stepped forward slowly as the concealed room illuminated automatically in deep crimson light. Hundreds of glass servers towered from floor to ceiling, each humming with impossible energy, while holographic maps projected above the central control platform displayed the entire hidden architecture of the global underworld economy. Shipping routes stretched across continents in glowing red lines. Swiss banking nodes flashed critical failure warnings. Political blackmail archives connected to Washington, Moscow, Dubai, and Rome were automatically sealing themselves behind irreversible encryption protocols. Weapons shipments traveling through private military contractors vanished one after another from international satellite tracking systems. Entire regions under Dante's command were being systematically disconnected. Bianca stared silently at the destruction unfolding before her, while a soft mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. Catastrophic breach detected. Unauthorized biological severance confirmed. Temporary partner access permanently revoked. Full empire reset initiated. Her chest rose slowly. The Veil network had recognized betrayal and activated ancestral failsafe. Everything was returning to its rightful owner. Suddenly the chamber doors exploded open behind her. Dante stormed inside, his face pale with disbelief, rage, and growing fear unlike anything Bianca had ever seen in him before. He froze instantly at the sight surrounding them. Hundreds of encrypted servers, hidden satellite feeds, live financial collapse spreading across 5 continents, entire weapons divisions disappearing from global maps. His breathing became uneven. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, stepping forward. Bianca turned slowly toward him, and for the first time in their marriage there was no fear left inside her eyes. Only absolute calm. Dante stared wildly at the monitors flashing catastrophic loss reports from every corner of his empire. private Swiss vaults permanently sealed, Colombian routes hijacked, arms warehouses entering irreversible lockdown, billions vanishing into inaccessible Morty-holding structures. His empire was dying in real time. "Fix it," he ordered, voice cracking now. "Bianca, whatever this is, shut it down immediately." Bianca studied him for several silent seconds before gently brushing the jagged remnants of butchered hair hanging against her cheeks. Then she spoke with terrifying softness. "You still do not understand, Dante." Another wave of emergency alarms exploded around them as the final network barriers collapsed worldwide. Bianca stepped closer until only inches separated them. Her voice dropped lower, colder, heavier than anything he had ever heard before. "This empire was never yours." Dante's entire face drained white. Somewhere deep beneath London, the criminal world began realizing their king had just lost control of everything. And standing before him now was the woman he had spent years humiliating, the true architect of the empire itself. Dante stood motionless inside the crimson-lit chamber, but for the first time in nearly 20 years ruling Europe's underworld, his legendary composure had completely fractured. The walls around him vibrated with the mechanical hum of hundreds of hidden servers working at terrifying speed, while holographic projections above the central command platform flashed catastrophic failure reports faster than his mind could process. Swiss laundering accounts containing billions were permanently sealed behind biometric encryption protocols he could no longer access. Private military contractors transporting illegal weapons across Eastern Europe had gone dark simultaneously. Smuggling fleets moving cocaine shipments through the Atlantic vanished from satellite tracking systems entirely. Government ministers in France, Germany, and Italy were disconnecting from protected blackmail channels, cutting every secret alliance his empire depended upon. Decades of criminal dominance were evaporating in front of his eyes within minutes, and standing quietly in the middle of the destruction was the woman he had humiliated less than 15 minutes earlier. Bianca watched him without emotion now, the broken, uneven strands of butchered silver-black hair framing a face that no longer carried weakness. Something fundamental had shifted inside her. Years of shrinking herself for the comfort of cruel men had vanished. In their place stood absolute authority. Dante staggered backward toward the nearest console, staring at the endless collapse spreading across the holographic world map suspended above them. His voice cracked violently. "No, this is impossible." He began tapping frantically against one encrypted access screen, attempting manual override. Instantly, the monitor rejected his biometric signature. "Unauthorized user. Access denied permanently." Dante slammed his fist against the console hard enough to crack reinforced glass. "Bianca, stop this now." She said nothing. Instead, she walked slowly toward the center platform, where a circular biometric scanner waited silently beneath crimson emergency lights. The moment her bare fingertips touched the polished obsidian surface, every screen inside the chamber instantly changed. The red warning alerts vanished and were replaced by a single gold insignia hidden from public knowledge for nearly 200 years. The ancient Morty crest. Beneath it, thousands of hidden asset transfers began rerouting automatically into protected family structures inaccessible to every criminal organization worldwide. Dante stared in complete disbelief. For years, he had believed marriage granted him ownership over Bianca's inherited systems. He had never questioned why impossible obstacles disappeared before they reached him. Rival syndicates mysteriously lost financial backing before wars even began. Government investigations collapsed overnight. Billion-dollar operations always succeeded with mathematical perfection. He thought he had conquered the world through fear, but now the horrifying truth finally unfolded before him. Bianca had allowed him temporary access. She had quietly carried the empire on her shoulders while letting him believe he built it himself. His knees suddenly buckled beneath the crushing realization. Dante Castellano, the most feared Mafia emperor alive, collapsed hard against the steel floor. Bianca turned toward him slowly. Her eyes were colder now than anything he had ever seen. Not angry, worse, empty, final. Then the chamber doors opened behind them. One after another, powerful figures began arriving upstairs after forcing access through the palace security lockdown. Russian cartel leaders, Balkan traffickers, 2 Middle Eastern arms financiers, private bankers responsible for laundering billions monthly through hidden European institutions. Every face carried visible terror. Their phones had shown the same impossible truth. The empire was dead. Entire criminal economies were freezing worldwide. Nobody looked at Dante anymore. Their eyes locked entirely onto Bianca standing beside the awakened command platform. The room felt heavier now, thick with panic and desperation. One Swiss banker stepped forward first, his voice trembling. "Mrs. Castellano, please, our accounts are gone. The offshore vaults have sealed permanently." Another syndicate leader followed immediately. "My weapons division disappeared from every customs system. I have men stranded in 6 countries." Across the floor, Dante slowly lifted his head, blood trickling from where shattered glass had sliced his knuckles moments earlier. For the first time in his entire life, fear entered his eyes. Not fear of death, fear of irrelevance, fear of powerlessness. Bianca stared down at him for several seconds before speaking with quiet authority powerful enough to silence the entire room instantly. "You spent years believing Dante ruled this empire." She paused as the final asset transfers completed behind her. Then she delivered the truth that shattered every illusion permanently. "But everything standing beneath this palace," her voice dropped lower, colder, absolute, "has always answered only to me." And in that terrifying silence, every king in the criminal underworld realized the woman they mocked was never the wife of the empire. She was the empire itself. The silence inside the hidden command chamber lasted only seconds before the entire underworld erupted into pure desperation. Men who had spent decades building reputations through fear now looked like frightened animals cornered before extinction. Billionaire traffickers gripped dead encrypted phones with trembling fingers, while cartel commanders barked useless orders into communication lines that no longer existed. Somewhere far below the palace, emergency lockdown sirens continued screaming through steel corridors as private security divisions discovered armored vaults refusing every override command. Outside London, private airfields controlled by the Castellano Empire had already frozen all departures after flight systems suddenly deregistered every company aircraft from international aviation databases. Across Europe, secret bank accounts tied to shell corporations began vanishing one after another, leaving entire criminal economies bleeding billions by the second. Yet standing in the middle of the catastrophe, Bianca Castellano looked calmer than she had in years. The torn emerald dress still clung tightly against her full body, exposing bruised skin where Dante had forced her onto the marble floor earlier. But now those bruises no longer looked like signs of weakness. They looked like evidence of a war she had finally decided to stop losing. The fear that once controlled her had disappeared completely. Tonight something far older than humiliation had awakened. Ownership, legacy, authority woven into her bloodline long before Dante Castellano ever learned how power truly worked. Suddenly the chamber doors opened wider as more figures flooded inside, drawn by the global collapse spreading through every criminal network connected to Black Monarch Palace. Mexican cartel financiers, Japanese syndicate brokers, Eastern European weapons dealers, corrupt parliament officials whose political careers existed only because Bianca's hidden systems had protected them for years. None of them cared about protocol anymore. The illusion of Dante's empire had shattered, and survival instinct was now stronger than loyalty. One elderly Swiss banker stepped forward first, sweat dripping visibly down his forehead despite the freezing room temperature. "Mrs. Castellano, listen carefully. If these systems remain offline another hour, the global black market collapses permanently. Governments will detect movement anomalies. Intelligence agencies will trace dormant laundering routes." Another man interrupted immediately. "We have $17 billion trapped inside Swiss reserves inaccessible without your authorization." Voices began overlapping violently. Arms dealers shouted about missing shipments. Politicians screamed about erased blackmail archives. Private mercenary commanders demanded satellite systems be restored before rival organizations launched coordinated attacks. Yet none of them addressed Dante anymore. The shift was impossible to ignore. The king who ruled this empire less than 30 minutes earlier now sat bleeding silently on the floor, while every powerful figure surrounding him instinctively turned toward Bianca, as though ancient hierarchy itself had rewritten reality. Dante noticed it too. The room no longer belonged to him. Then movement from the corner drew everyone's attention. Sofia Marino staggered violently against the wall, a horrifying scream tearing from her throat as smoke rose from the silver-black strands still fused into her scalp. The stolen hair had begun glowing unnaturally bright now, spreading burning veins of red heat across her neck and shoulders. She clawed desperately at the roots, ripping skin apart in panic, but the strands remained permanently attached like living wires feeding directly into her nervous system. The biological rejection had accelerated. Her body lacked the genetic compatibility required to stabilize Morty encryption fibers, and now the system was aggressively destroying foreign tissue cell by cell. Sophia collapsed hard against the marble floor, convulsing violently, while the smell of burning flesh filled the chamber. Several cartel leaders instinctively stepped backward in horror. Dante tried crawling toward her, blood smeared across the steel floor beneath trembling hands. "Sophia," he whispered weakly, reaching out helplessly. Bianca watched the scene without emotion. Slowly she stepped forward toward the massive reinforced doors leading directly into Black Monarch Palace's central throne chamber. Hundreds of terrified eyes followed her movement. Her heels clicked sharply against the steel floor as she reached the entrance and paused without turning back. Then her voice cut through the suffocating silence with terrifying calm authority. For years, this empire worshipped vanity, beauty, and men too arrogant to understand where real power lived. She finally turned, dark eyes locking onto every terrified face staring back at her. Tonight, her voice lowered into something colder than death itself. The old empire dies. And one by one, without command, every syndicate king inside the chamber slowly dropped to their knees before the woman they had once laughed at, because they finally understood the throne had never belonged to Dante Castellano. It had always been waiting for her. The massive reinforced doors leading into Black Monarch Palace's central throne chamber slid open with a low mechanical roar, revealing the room where for nearly 2 decades Dante Castellano had ruled the criminal underworld like an untouchable god. The chamber itself looked less like part of a mafia fortress and more like the heart of a hidden empire built beyond governments. Black marble pillars stretched toward vaulted ceilings lined with gold-plated surveillance screens displaying territories spread across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. In the center stood the throne itself, carved from obsidian imported illegally from volcanic mines in Iceland, designed as a symbol meant to remind every visitor who controlled the modern underworld. For years, Bianca had sat beside it on a smaller chair placed deliberately lower, a silent reminder that she was never meant to be seen as equal. But tonight everything had changed. Her footsteps echoed heavily through the chamber while behind her dozens of cartel leaders, senators, mercenary commanders, and billionaire traffickers remained kneeling in terrified silence. Somewhere behind them, Sophia's screams had weakened into broken whimpers as the stolen silver-black strands fused permanently into destroyed tissue, leaving her body convulsing helplessly against the floor. Bianca stopped before the throne and slowly ran trembling fingers over the cold obsidian surface. For years she had been forced to shrink herself emotionally, physically, mentally, allowing men too blinded by ego to believe power belonged only to violence. But now the illusion had shattered forever. Suddenly movement exploded behind her. Dante Castellano had disappeared from the command chamber floor. A split second later, a sharp metallic sound sliced through the silence. Several cartel leaders gasped. Bianca turned instinctively just as Dante launched forward with the speed of pure desperation, his face twisted into madness unlike anything she had seen before. In his hand gleamed an ancient black dagger taken from the royal weapons vault hidden beneath the palace. The blade was forged decades earlier by military engineers contracted secretly through rogue intelligence divisions, specifically designed to bypass biometric defenses protecting elite syndicate bloodlines. This was not the attack of a husband. It was the final betrayal of a dying king refusing surrender. Dante screamed as he drove the dagger directly toward Bianca's stomach with enough force to kill instantly. Time seemed to freeze. The blade struck her full abdomen dead center. Every person watching braced for blood, for death, for catastrophic destruction. Instead, a deafening metallic crack thundered through the chamber. The dagger shattered into dozens of broken fragments before touching skin, exploding harmlessly across the marble floor like cheap glass hitting stone. Absolute silence swallowed the room. Dante stood frozen inches away, staring at the broken handle still trembling in his hand. Bianca slowly lowered her eyes toward her stomach where not even a scratch existed. Then she looked back at him with terrifying calm. "You still do not understand," she whispered softly. "My body was never weakness." Her voice deepened as years of buried truth finally surfaced. "The women of the Morty bloodline were engineered generations ago. Our nervous systems process criminal infrastructure beyond normal neurological capacity. Our bodies adapt to contain pressure ordinary humans cannot survive." "My weight," she stepped closer as Dante instinctively stumbled backward, "is biological armor." Tears mixed with rage across Dante's face as reality crushed him harder than any bullet ever could. Every empire he conquered had only existed because Bianca allowed it. Every victory he celebrated belonged to systems connected entirely to her blood, her body, her inheritance. He had spent years mocking the very foundation keeping him powerful. Bianca gently removed her wedding ring and dropped it at his feet. The tiny sound echoed like a death sentence. Then she turned and walked toward the obsidian throne, while every syndicate leader instinctively lowered their heads deeper in submission. Slowly she sat in the central seat, once reserved for Dante alone. The enormous surveillance screens surrounding the chamber flickered as every hidden network worldwide transferred final command authority directly into her biometric control. Across Europe, billions in frozen criminal assets reactivated under new ownership. Private armies received updated loyalty commands, banking routes reopened, weapons divisions restored instantly. Governments around the world unknowingly watched the global underworld change rulers within seconds. Bianca crossed one leg calmly over the other and stared down at the broken man kneeling before her. "You believed beauty creates power," she said quietly. "You believed my body embarrassed your empire." She paused while the entire chamber listened in breathless silence. "But I was never standing beside your throne, Dante." Her eyes hardened completely. "You were standing on mine." Security guards immediately moved forward, forcing Dante violently onto his knees while dragging the ruined Sofia beside him. Bianca raised one hand and delivered her final decree. Dante Castellano was stripped permanently of all authority, imprisoned beneath the throne room where he would spend the rest of his life watching the empire he lost serve the woman he destroyed. Sofia would remain alive, permanently scarred by the biological rejection consuming her body as punishment for her greed. Above them, London's skyline glittered peacefully, unaware the world's most dangerous criminal empire had just entered a new era. Bianca leaned back against the obsidian throne, finally embracing every inch of herself without shame for the first time in her life. Tonight the kings had fallen. The queen they mocked had risen. And from this moment forward, the entire underworld would remember one terrifying truth forever. Never underestimate the woman carrying the empire in her blood. The reign of Bianca Castellano had officially begun.